has been working. She's been working for the Bedford Public Schools for eight years now, 10 years now. Wow. And she's a director of special education, and her biggest, and I got linked up with her through the new superintendent. Says, oh, I was doing stuff on inclusion and all that. She's, oh, you got to talk to Marianne. So we got linked up almost 2 years ago. So we're all excited. We finally got to meet you in person. So welcome to the Rotary Club of Bedford. And we want to hear what's going on. Oh. Yeah, I get one other little part from Sarah Stanton, the town manager. She said the select board identified two overarching goals that impact the multiple categories of the town of Bedford. The first one is diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI, to develop an implementation of Bedford's racial equity and municipal action plan. And also the second goal, in addition to DEI, is sustainability. And those two goals for the town of Bedford overarch everything we do in town. So Marianne, your talk could be more important than right now. So it's a little cooler right up front where the fan is. Does she need this?
All right. So thank you so much for having me. I am sitting here thinking I'm amazed that I haven't met you all prior to this, but I'm happy to be here now. I started in the district as a special ed administrator just at the building level at the high school. And then I took the position as a director of special ed in 2014. And when I started here, I had been previously an assistant director in Milford, New Hampshire for a number of years prior to that. And Massachusetts and New Hampshire are different in that Massachusetts, we have a lot of private and even public special education schools that children can attend other than their school district. Whereas in New Hampshire and many, many other states, they don't have that option. But that was different for me coming here to understand that children who have disabilities would go to another school that's not their own public school. I didn't understand that. It didn't make an ounce of sense to me. It still doesn't make an ounce of sense to me, just so everybody is clear. I understand from the research that it is extremely, extremely important for our students to be educated in their own school, in their own neighborhoods, with their brothers and sisters, with their cousins, with their neighborhoods peers that they play outside with on Saturdays and Sundays, that they go to church with. And when we send our children out to different schools, they lose that experience. So when I started, we had about 440 students in special education in the district, and 98 of those students went to other schools throughout Massachusetts. And that didn't make sense to me at all. I couldn't wrap my head around it. And the other thing that I recognize is that we didn't really have any programming in Bedford for children with more significant impairments that would cause them to be sent to different schools. And we didn't, because the thought process really is we have another system here in Massachusetts that doesn't really exist in other states, where we have collaborative programs. So Bedford had always really depended on our collaboratives to provide for those educational opportunities for students with more significant impairments. However, even when our students were in a collaborative, which is a really good program, collaboratives are when, for those of you who might not know, they are when school districts, we have Lexington, Arlington, Bedford, Burlington, Belmont come together, and we developed programs together that are housed inside schools because it was important to us. And some programs, each school district dedicated certain classrooms so that students with more significant needs could go to school in a public school setting. But I still had a problem with that because that to me meant that someone from Bedford may go to school in Belmont and they're in a public school, so that's great. But they're still not with their brothers and sisters who are going to school here in Bedford. So I really started to take a look at why is this, what's happening, and why can't we house our students here? And I worked really, really hard with our team over the years, and we started to slowly develop programs to bring our students back. So a little statistics right now, we have about 520 students. Your town has grown much in the time that I've been here. So we have about 520 students in special education right now, and 40 of them are in out of district placements. And I would say those 40 students are very appropriately placed and have probably more medical needs or other things that can't be served within a public school setting. We started to build programming, and there was a couple of different strands of programming that we really looked at. One was social emotional program. I recognized that by looking at all of those students that were out of district, a lot of them had significant social emotional impairments that required more supports. And from that, we developed two different types of programming. We have an all-inclusive program. It's called the Bridge program. And right now we started right at the middle school level, went to the high school, and then brought it up from Davis and Lane, but now it goes K through 12. It's called the Bridge program. So it's all inclusive. That means our students in that program receive their social emotional supports, whatever that may mean for the students. That might mean some social pragmatic work, that might mean some therapeutic supports, but they receive their education in a public school setting. They go to math, they go to reading, they have all of those supports with their peers. And we have brought the supports to them so that they can still participate in school. We do have a program for students with social emotional needs that are greater, that require more supports. It's a substantially separate program, which means that they have their teachers, actually, they have a program where they don't go out into classes. Their teachers come to the classroom and provide the supports that they need. And they receive significant therapeutic supports throughout the day. There is a counselor that is in the program all day long throughout the day, and teachers who are trained in teaching students with social emotional needs. That's our most significant social emotional program in the district. And by doing that, by having those programs in our school, we've made it so that more students can be educated within their own community. And it's just really, really, really super important to me. I mean, if the research will tell you, students who are included have better later life outcomes, going to college, better jobs, all kinds of different things than students who are not included. The other program that we have is our autism program. And that, my goodness, has grown as well in just my short 8 years as the director of special ed. We started with an inclusive program. So autism is a spectrum, right? So some students have really significant needs, and some students don't have less significant needs, right? And can be included throughout their day, just like our students with social emotional disabilities, as long as they're provided the appropriate supports and services. So we started with our inclusive program, which meant that the students receive social pragmatics work and any other kind of supports that they need, occupational therapy, counseling. And we started that at the middle and the high school level. And then we also brought that down to Davis and Lane. So now our our inclusive program for students with autism runs from pre-K all the way through 12th grade. So I'm really very, very, very proud of that program. They are the light of my life, and to see those students on a daily basis in our schools makes me amazingly happy. We also started a program for more students with autism that have more intense needs and that are not able to participate to a great extent in the general education curriculum. However, that to me does not mean that they can't participate in their neighborhood and with their peers, or at some points, right? Some parts. And if I sent all of these students to special ed schools that in other towns, they would lose the opportunity to even be able to participate in art or music or lunch or recess with their sisters, cousins, and neighborhood peers. So we have our program. We started that program at the Davis School. You know, we have students that come for preschool that participate in that type of programming. And then we have students that are at Davis, Lane, and middle school right now. The program at the middle school, we've grown it, right? So we started at the Davis School, and those students that we started with, they're now in 7th grade. So they have one more year at the middle school level before that program transitions, and we start a program at the high school as well. And then that program will be K-12, but that program was really designed to grow with that population of students. And it's, you know, it started with just a few students, and to see their progress from when those students were, you know, in 1st grade and 2nd grade, and people were just, I will tell you that the people in Bedford were extremely supportive of the idea of developing these programs, and extremely nervous and worried at the same time, because they hadn't had it before. They didn't understand what the impact of the school would be. They didn't understand what the impact would be on the students. They didn't necessarily believe that it would be the best thing, I mean, for the students. And to see now how our school community and our whole community has embraced our programs and our students, it's really touching to me. It's really touching. So that's a little bit about the programming in Bedford and that we have at our schools for special education now. And by the way, those are just our special programs, but we have, you know, special education students who have learning disabilities, who have all different other kinds of sorts of things, who in the past may have gone out as well for other various reasons, who are now we're able to teach them in district. After we started the SAIL program, one of the big initiatives was reading. There was a big push recently in the state, and some legislation passed by the state regarding dyslexia. And so again, we worked really, really hard to say, okay, how are we going to increase our capacity to teach students with dyslexia in the public school setting without having to have them go out to a different school. And I think that we have also done really, really well with that as well. And you know, as we progress, we look every single year. One of the things we do is we sit down and we look and we say, who are our kids that are currently out of district, and what can we do to increase our capacity to bring even more kids back? Because it's that important. And one of the things that Ralph just brought up to me, which is exciting to me, you know, to hear about the town's goals. they match very much with the school district's goals, right? And then the school district's goals, each school has goals as well. And all of our schools have diversity, equity, and inclusion. One of the things that used to really tick me off a lot was that when we used to talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, a lot of people didn't include our students with disabilities in that category. And as of late, I would say, it's really through our leadership team that's really begun to change a lot. And also with parent groups in the community, they've really helped to spread the word that, we need equity and inclusion for all of our students. And that's really begun to change. And one of the things that we worked on greatly this summer was how can we work with the town and the recreation department so that our students with disabilities can receive their special education supports that they need over the summer so that they don't regress. Some of our students go to school throughout the summer, but also still participate in the fun things that their brothers and sisters and their cousins are doing in town, such as swimming lessons and camp. Just going to camp with your neighborhood peers is something that was really brought to my attention from a parent group that made them really, really sad. They felt like their children were missing out on an opportunity to play and to be a kid because they had an academic need that was so great that made them miss some of those opportunities. So we began to look at how could the school partner with the rec department and do something different so that our students could participate in both. And this year, what we did was we always have a 5-week program or for our academic programs or a 6-week program for our students with autism. And what we did was we built in a break over the summer for 2 weeks because the camps, the way they schedule their programming, they schedule it for every 2 weeks. So if I had a break in my programming, students would be able to sign up for at least that 1-2 week session of camp and learn how to swim. That was such a big topic of discussion. My children will never learn how to swim. So now those children, they had a 2-week break so that they could participate in the camp fully. And the other great thing was that the camp in turn hired some of our very trained teaching assistant staff who know the students, who know how to work with students with disabilities to work in their program for those 2 weeks so that they could assist the students with more significant disabilities. And I'll tell you, we had some really great feedback from our parents. Some were just really overjoyed that their children were able to participate, and they loved seeing them smile and have fun and go to camp. Some feedback from teachers might not have been so, they worried about that a little bit. So we might do something a little bit different next year. They worried about the momentum of the teaching with having a break in the middle of it and stopping it. So we're going to continue to work on it. It was our first time, but like I said, it was our first time forming this partnership with the rec department. And I anticipate that we're going to continue working on that. We already have a meeting set up, I think, for next week to start talking about how we can make things better or even increase what we did for next summer. So there you go. I think that's about it. Yeah.
Based on the recreation departments, they have been sending students with special needs to the Bedford TV program, and they have been taking those classes. Aram was one of the best ones. He had Down syndrome. He came in, he became a key camera operator. He covered a lot of the sporting events and all the other things. But getting back to, you're glad to see the town is getting on board, the churches are getting on board. Rotary International big time is getting on board too.
I love
But
it.
the other part is this club right here started getting on board back in 1990. When we established the thing, Nat can remember it, Bob can remember it. We had a child in Bedford that got bit by a mosquito with Down syndrome and got Eastern equine encephalitis,
Okay.
paralyzed from the cheek down.
Oh,
And they started a thing at they closed center school, but this club rebuilt one of the classrooms in what they called the TX Center. And it was, to develop technical skills for kids with special needs. And it got going for about a year and a half. But that whole concept, it broke away from the center school space, but they kept it going with the Zupkis family and building technology support to the kids that need it, no matter what their disability is. Unbelievable things can start happening.
I
And
love
so,
it.
yeah, we were right involved with from the start. Bob?
That program was actually sponsored by Apple Computer.
Oh,
They gave us all the computers and the high-end technology, and the various people from MITRE, from the Air Force people at Hanscom, and what's the other one over there?
Millibor?
No, anyway, what they would do is volunteer their time. And they would send a group of them to work with a particular student. And whatever the handicap was, no matter how severe, they would develop a means for that student to communicate,
nice.
not only with his teachers and stuff, but with his co-students, you know? And
Okay.
for example, maybe all he could do or she could do was blow into a tube. Well, they would figure so that when they blew into the tube, a red light would come across, hit the TV screen, and they could communicate.
Isn't that amazing?
Yep.
It is
Yeah.
amazing. Yeah.
So hats off to Apple for that one.
Hats off to Apple.
That's
Sure.
off the Bedford Rotary Club for helping to get the whole.
Well, we built it.
Yeah, you made the room.
I love it.
Yeah, my daughter was in the same class as Andrew Zupkis, and they were buddies, okay? So much so that she would get out of class with a bad headache whenever he had to go rest in the nurse's office so they could continue their conversation, which they couldn't really because he didn't talk. So she came home one day and she was really angry. Why are you angry? Andrew, I'm mad at Andrew. Why? I mean, the kid, you know, how could you be mad at him? Well, he always has to have his own way whenever we're working on a project. I said, how? He said, well, he blinks 1 for yes and 2 blinks for no. And he's always blinking 2 blinks at me. And so the kid was taught really how to communicate,
Yes.
and he did it well.
Yep.
God bless him, you know?
Yep. So this, can I ask, is this student, because I don't know him, I wasn't in the district at the time, but was he fully included
He was
in Bedford?
fully included right in grade
Yeah.
1.
I love it.
And yeah, it was a perfect setup. And before we even brought him into the school, we picked out the teacher and all that. We wanted to say, no arm twisting here. We give it a work together.
I love
She
it.
said she wanted to give it a try. I said, okay. The mother agreed that if it was not working, you don't have to put up with a big argument and then you'll find something else.
Mhm.
She said, you feel positive, I feel positive, let's give it a go. And we did.
That's
And we
awesome.
called every parent. The teacher called half of them, I called the other half. He said, this is the situation. We kind of built the class around Andrew. One mother who just about half a year ago got back to my wife. She was out visiting her daughter in California and was watching her daughter deal with her granddaughter. And she said, boy, why didn't you get the attention to understand this stuff? Because Andrew was in my class, he really knew how to handle this whole thing.
That's
And she said, I gotta confess, I was one of those parents that almost objected to my daughter being in that classroom.
Mhm.
Because I didn't want Andrew to interfere with the educational progress of my child. And he
Right,
says, I am so glad I kept her in
Right.
that classroom.
right. And
So
so,
I also have to say that Debbie Davis, who is the teacher, she was really, really extremely intuitive. And she knew, she called me, she says, you know, your daughter is having a problem reading. I think she might be a little dyslexic. but I don't recommend her going into special ed because sometimes those kids get stigmatized.
Yeah.
She says, I'm gonna work with her one-on-one, like maybe for 20 minutes reading, right? And I think you and Frank, my husband, should do the same thing at night. And we did. And she overcame her dyslexia. She was able to, until she was in graduate school, and they just said to her, if you sign up to take this test, if we could prove that you're dyslexic, you'll get an extra 15 minutes at the end to continue your test. And she did, badly dyslexic still, and she got the extra 15 minutes. And she said, as soon as the teacher looked at my notebook, he could tell that I was dyslexic. And I said, give me that notebook. I looked and says, there's nothing wrong with this notebook. This is the way I take my notes. I said, okay, that's where I got it from. So, you know, if you have early intervention and these teachers are intuitive, you know, you really can go a long way.
You know, and you brought up a really good point. I'm sorry, I keep interrupting you, but you know, I spoke a lot about the benefits of inclusion for the students with disabilities. And what you just brought up was so instrumental in pointing out the benefit of inclusion on everybody else in the classroom.
I think Jim has a question before you close.
Yeah.
Right, right.
Okay, I have to unmute this, but we have to mute this. Oh.
You have to do it in the right order.
All right, go ahead, Jim.
Oh, I have two quick questions. One is, in the interest of each child achieving his maximum potential in life, how do you judge success with your integration as opposed to allow them to go out to specialized schools?
So there's a couple of different aspects and avenues that you can look at when you're judging, you know, success. And I would say I would judge success by how the student did. I would judge success by how much they were included in their community, right? That to me is a judge of success. But when you're looking at, if you're talking about academic success and academic rigor, right, that our students with disabilities take the same assessments as all the rest of our students, right? So we have our finger on the pulse of how much progress they're making at all times. So we have an understanding. If there comes a point in time, Jim, that we think that a student is not progressing the way that they're supposed to progress in relation to their typical peers, that's when we have the conversations about whether or not we do have the right placement for the child. But, you know, our job is not only to maximize a student's potential. That's actually not our job. Our job is a free, appropriate public education, which is more well-rounded than that, right? Its ability to participate in drama, in music, and all of those other types of extracurriculars as everybody else, right? So we have our finger on that all the time. Our students with disabilities that are in district, our students with autism, our students with social emotional disabilities, they take MCAS, they take our benchmark formative assessments at the beginning of the year, and the end of the year. Their curriculum is not different. They are fully included within the general education curriculum. You know, sometimes people might think that because you have autism or because you have a social emotional disability, that means that you can't learn as their peers. And that's just not true. And that is what we want to show, that students, despite having autism or a social emotional impairment, can indeed learn the general education curriculum. It's just that we have to provide them the supports they need, the accommodations that they need in order to access it. And if a student isn't making progress, it's on us to determine what it is that they need that we're not giving them, that we could that we could help them progress more.
How big a factor is cost? Because it seems to me like the deeper one is into needing special education, then the more important the actual teacher or staff person is that can do that. And that tends to be expensive, I think. And you get the economies of scale on one hand if you can group those people under one or two highly skilled, highly paid people, as opposed to incorporating them and including them in your local. Is that a constant stress between cost and effectiveness?
Yeah,
Can I answer that?
yeah, sure.
So 8-year Jim, you're right on target on one of the concerns that I personally had myself. Victor, I can't remember his last name, he used to be our town treasurer.
Yeah.
He came up with this thing called the virtual budget. And we could look at the town budget. And I said, oh, I love it. I looked on my computer and here was this budget, showed this account, this here, this here. And then it showed out of town placement for special education. And it was huge. I mean,
Millions.
On
It's
the
millions.
scale, it was a big scale up, and all the rest of them, like the recreation department, all this other, were tiny. And I thought, wow, there's got to be a mistake here. I said, Victor, we got to go up. You got a bad mistake right here. And he said, no, Ralph, that's what it is. Out of town placement is huge in Bedford.
Yeah.
He said, there's one child in here that we, in fact, are paying a taxi driver more to drive this child to Worcester to get the special training that he got out there. And there was more money going to a taxi driver than to an educator that we could have hired to
Correct.
teach him right in a classroom in Bedford.
100%.
And so this out of state, out of town placement has gotten totally out of control.
Yeah.
And this is a chance we can really look at budget wise and make it real valuable for a special ed teacher to come into a classroom, help the students, but they don't just help that one student, they'll help the other students to help that student. And so everybody learns from the opportunity.
Yes.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to ask, is this happening for only Bedford or it's also happening for other districts? Just
Yeah, so I can talk a little bit about other districts because they're my peers and I work very closely in Massachusetts. That is a benefit. We do tend to work very closely, particularly with our lab collaborative districts, which are in surrounding us. And all of us work really hard. We all understand not only the educational benefit, but the financial benefits of having these programs within our school. So we all do have similar programs. When we started the autism program here in town, I worked really closely with my peers in Lexington who had already started such a program, and they allowed John Sills, who was the superintendent at the time, and some of my special education teachers to go, and we did a field trip and we spent an afternoon in Lexington touring their programs. So I know that they also have those types of programs. Arlington recently has started a language-based learning disabilities program, which is serving students with dyslexia. So we are all in the same boat. We meet, we talk all the time. Additionally, because we understand that it's much better for our students to be in district, and sometimes students, for whatever reason, being in their home district isn't working out well for them, whether it's a social impact of, peers not getting along with a certain peer group or whatever. We have worked to come up with a plan that we can share with other districts. So we've had students from Belmont who have tuitioned their students to come in and paid us money to come to our special ed programs here in Bedford. And that worked well for us, but it also worked well for our peers in Belmont. And we have a student right now that came to us from Hanscom, already placed in Acton-Bucksborough. So we continued because that student had made friendships there and was feeling very comfortable there. Rather than asking a military family to transition one more time, we tuitioned him there to Acton-Bucksborough because that's better for the student. So it gets very complicated. Yeah.
I told you about the special.
Yes.
And it's very difficult to have inclusion.
Yes.
And our biggest challenge is the parents of children with without the needs
Right.
are uncomfortable being with the children with the needs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure, you gotta educate everybody.
And it's very difficult right now to do the inclusion.
Yeah.
So what we are doing, what I'm doing back at home, I have a special place for children with special needs who come in and receive all those services. We have the autism, we have cerebral palsy, and many other conditions, social emotional disabilities in one place. But we're still struggling with how to include them even in the mainstream, so they stay in a home. When this happened, especially, I had a child with special needs, and that's how I ended up where I am. I got to a point where I could not educate her from Uganda. She's actually in lab. Right.
She's at lab. Oh,
Yes.
nice. Okay.
So she's in Lexington. My sister lives here. She's an American, so she offered to bring her in so she can be able to actually have the services, because she was doing very well. She could not stay at the level where we are. She needed to be inclusive so she can learn more and interact with other children of her peers, which is so different from back at home. But we are getting there, but it's more of an outcast. They don't want to associate
Right.
with these kids. So it's quite difficult, but the stigma is being, it's our biggest challenge. We're working on the stigma and seeing how best we can do it. So I am so interested. When I come in, I really try to learn how the inclusion is working and how they do it. So I've been getting some resources from here. And it would be nice if I could get more information. on
You
how
Stay
to
in
run
touch
that
with us.
business.
Yeah, you are welcome to come and meet with me, and I can take you, I'm happy to take you around school.
Great.
at any
Yeah.
time.
Don't forget to ring the bell.
I'm sorry.
Few more minutes, we can raise 510 room at my.
Let's give Marianne a special round of applause.
Thank you.
Have a question.
All right, yeah.
Wait, there goes the bell, you can all leave.
Judy.
As far as the students over the summer getting to do both things, I have known of kids going to summer school and then going to Bedford Day Camp, sponsored by the town for the afternoon. So that would be, one thing that you could look into.
Yeah, and that's what I was talking about, that,
Yeah.
so there's a difference between kids club and,
No, I'm
Summer
not talking about,
adventures.
so I'm talking about going to some adventures
so, yeah, so
afterwards.
the problem was though,
Yeah,
is
yeah.
that the way that they had their program, structured, and
Yeah.
we offer busing that
Right,
goes
yeah.
for all 5 weeks, so
Uh-huh.
that they can attend after the fact. But
Yeah.
their swim programs,
Yeah.
or if they were going on field trips, our students could never participate. The swim programs happen in the morning, and our students would never be able to take swim lessons or go on a field trip, or they would miss other different certain activities. They could go in the afternoon,
Uh-huh.
yes, but it was all free. Yes, and they would get there at 12:30, right?
Uh-huh.
And they would have missed lunch, so they were eating alone. And it was hard for them to then join in to the fun, right? So we have to make it better, and I'm so happy that we're able to have these conversations now that can make it better.
Andrew's parents or the kids that were in their class, everyone invited Andrew to their birthday party. And one of them said, I'm gonna have my birthday party over at the trampoline center. And I said, well, you can, because Andrew had to come in a wheelchair, he had a stand-up wheelchair because he had no muscles. And they said, oh, Andrew will be fine at the trampoline center. And in fact, his nurse went along with him. They got him on the trampoline. They all bounced him up and down. They had a great time. It was the best birthday party that girl had ever had.
I bet.
And
I bet.
the adults mess it up every time. the kids figure out how to get it together
Right.
and get Andrew involved. And it just was perfect.
So here's a different kind of question, Marianne. I love your capability program instead of the
Oh, yes.
as a capability. But my question is, when they graduate from high school, what happens?
Do good stuff.
They do such good stuff. Oh my gosh, I wish I could, yes, I get so excited about. So I have to do this really terrible task. I've been working on it the last couple days, but it turned out to be not such a terrible task at all. So the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education has asked us to go back to students who graduated, special education students who graduated from Bedford and in 2021. So that was like a year ago. And find out, I have to do a survey with them and find out what they're doing. Right? So I was like, oh gosh. So I sent, there was a list of 45 kids that graduated that year. And I sent out emails with a link for the survey that they can take themselves. And I got a few responses, and then I sent out another email, then I sent a letter to their home. I had 10 responses. I have 35 students, and the department is like, did you call them? Did you get, we need the answers. I'm like, oh, good. So I have to prove and show that I have reached out to these families. And I was like, oh my gosh. All right, I have to call 35 families and ask them these questions. I called 2 yesterday. Actually, I called 5. I left messages on 3. I was able to speak to 2. And it brightened my whole entire day. The 2 people that I did talk to, some significantly impaired children, one of which was in our social emotional program. Both of them are college, one at Dartmouth, one at University of New Hampshire. That girl at University of New Hampshire is studying special education because of what she was given in our school. And the other, I think, is in a nursing program. So yes, the outcomes for our students are extremely, extremely positive. Remember, keep in mind that research shows that this is in fact the case. Students who go to out of district placements or are not included, their outcomes are not as good as students who graduate with their peers. The academic rigor that they get, and to go back to Jim's question, the academic rigor is greater here, and that they would get that here in Bedford as opposed to an out of district placement. These students are included in all general education classes. So yeah, I mean, I think that that's just 2 examples, but
It'll cover all of them.
made my whole day.
Yeah.
Made my whole day, right? I was like, yes, this is awesome. And the notes that I got from the parents after speaking to them, and yeah.
The husband of last year's vice president of Rotary International is totally deaf. And they opened restaurants in not Montreal, but more west of Montreal. And they made a point to hire all people with special needs.
Yes.
Serious things, Down syndrome, the whole deal. And as a matter of fact, they opened several different restaurants, and they were all functioning perfectly, making tons of money. And now they're selling off their businesses because they're retiring. The people they hired are buying their businesses.
Yeah.
They're running the restaurants. And now the owner, and he said, in the old days, that kid never would have gotten anything.
Right,
And now he's running the business that he started in. And yeah, he says, just unbelievable.
What has the observation been about the rate of autism?
Gosh. Ugh.
Okay, so you just answered it.
Yeah, I mean, the rate of autism, I think when I started the program, I don't know, I want to say it was maybe 1 in 25, and we went to 1 in 40, and I think now we're at 1 in 56. Children have autism. The rate is rising alarmingly even.
You said it started at 1 in 20, and now it's 1 in 56, it would be going down.
The other way.
So maybe I'm
Right,
misunderstanding the
exactly.
question. So there's one student, one. So, oh, yeah. So no, so. You're right. Anyway, I got that wrong.
Just.
And I'm trying, yeah, I gotta flip that around, right? So now we're,
That makes more sense.
yeah, so now, yes.
Okay, so it's gone from about 2% to 5%.
Yeah, that's a lot. That's a lot of students with.
Now, is this because they're being diagnosed?
Yeah.
Or has it always been that way and it was not diagnosed?
Right, so that's the $100,000 question right there, right? As technology and understanding of the disability and understanding of the brain. As all of these things come about, we have more knowledge now than we ever did. And I think, I think that the researchers would agree, that it's probably always been there, and now we're just understanding it more, right, and diagnosing it
Well,
more.
the hypothesis is kids aren't playing in the dirt as much, and it changes the bacteria in the gut and stuff, and that's leading to more autoimmune diseases. And maybe that's connected to autism too.
Yeah, I mean,
And they didn't take when diabetes has gone way up.
yeah, that is true. That is absolutely 100% true. And think about the rate of diagnosing of ADHD,
Yeah.
right? And
Well, but yeah,
But the
so,
most important part is we want to build inclusion so that these people, you can diagnose somebody, yeah, you got problems, that doesn't mean you have to be out of the business, you can be brought in.
right, so what are we gonna, now that we know,
Yeah.
What are
okay,
we-
this is
what
it,
are we
all right,
gonna do?
I understand, you're gonna do the problem, but we can all make it through somehow.
right?
you also have kids spending more time on screens instead of.
Ah, that's a whole nother.